Hello friends, today we are redoing our battle system because for two reasons. One, I didn't really like the end result, and two, we didn't use parameters, something that I myself just recently learned about and learned how to use them. So, first things first, let's just delete everything related to our enemies here in our scene, because we will going to be doing those from the ground up. So we have our sword, but I'd like to make a little bit of a better animation for it. Let's try to fix that a little bit. It should go past the camera. Like so. Maybe that's fine. So, what we are trying to achieve here is what I have with my own game. So this works like this. We have enemies, they are hitting us. We also have a crossbow. So yeah, this is how it works. We can have enemies attack us, doing damage. We also have a crossbow here, but we are not going to do that, at least for now. I might even redo that myself. Okay, I will create a new folder here for us under the action lists. This will be our battle system. So we will need to have several different action lists for our enemies and for our player. So everything works the way I've set it up. We have our player damage here, player HP. Player could also have armor, so let's keep that in mind. Yeah. Okay, let's start with the damage calculation action lists. So let's create another folder. This is just to keep it organized. You can do it however you want with the folders, but I will create in here a new adventure creator action list. Let's give it a number 1 in the start, so we know it will be the first, and this will be our hit check. We will set it to run in the background, and it will be a new global variable with the type of integer, and just name this hit chance. And in the action list, we will set an action for the variable global and select the hit chance and set it as random from 0 to 100. So this is just setting technically the percentage of the hit chance. So like it's a number from 0 to 100, and then later on we will check if the hit chance number is higher than something, then we will hit. It should be a very small number. For example, I have it at 4. So if the number is higher than 4, then the player will hit. Then we have a skill check. We are doing all of these in different action lists, so just to keep it organized. So that will be 2 and skill check. And depending if our player has different skills, we can create another global variable for it. And then if the player would gain some skills, you would increase this from another stuff that happens in your game. But it is also the type of integer, and this would be, let's say, skill attack. So this will be our attack skill. And let's open that. Then we will here. This is just one type of doing it, but if our skill attack is, let's say, less than 11, then we will go variable set global select your skill, not skill attack, but the player damage. And we will set our damage to 5. So this basically, depending on our skill level, it will set the player's damage to some value here. So then we will just create new ones if it is less than 21. Then we will raise the damage to 10. So depending how like much you want the skill to affect, you want to modify here, but this is just a simple version to show how you would do different skill levels for the player. So if it's technically less than 11 means 0 to 10 and our damage is 5, and 10 to 20 it is 10, and so forth. So for every larger value you will have more damage. Okay, so next up, another action list. We could also just duplicate these, so it will be faster. Just Ctrl D on one of the action lists and delete whatever you have in there. But this is 3, and this is crit check. Open that. And let's create another new variable. We will need a lot of these. And this will be another integer value, and this is crit chance. So here, variable set crit chance set as random 100. So again, this is technically the same as the hit check, but here instead of checking a low value, we are checking a high value. So check the same crit chance. If it's more than, let's say, 95, then we will go ahead and set our variable player damage, set it as a formula, and then copy your player damage replacement token, copy this token text and paste it here, and then times, so it's a star, and 2, or however you want your critical damage to do. Let's say 3 for us here. And then to avoid us having the same values every time we do damage, so it's not always just 10, 10, 10 if our skill level is like something between 10 and 20, we will add random damage, and that is the 4th one. So in here we have set based on the player's level how much the increase the damage we will do. Since we don't have a player level, let's create that another new variable, and this will be player level, and it is also of the type integer, and the initial value should be 1. Okay, so let's check our player level. If it's less than 2, we will increase variable set, and for this we need another integer value of the type increase random damage, and this value for set value increase it by, let's say, 5, and then just copy these for as long as your player is able to have levels. I have done it so every 2 levels our random damage will increase. So it will always increase the damage from 0 to 5. So it will be set as a random 0 to 5. Not set value, set random. And then on levels, so this is like on level 1, we will always increase the random damage by 0 to 5. And then on level 2 to 3, it will be increasing the random damage by 0 to 10 and so on and so forth, depending on the player's level. And let's increase at 4 to 5. Let's increase by 15. This again depends on how much levels you want your players to have. So when they reach the maximum, then we just check if it's equal to this maximum levels value and then increase even more damage. But yeah, this is the simple version. So the last up for these will be yet another action list, and this will be 5, and this will be the calculate damage. Open that. So first things here is we will run an action list asset file, and this will be our hit check. It will technically run immediately, but just to make sure that it has the time to do the calculation for the hit check, we will wait until finish. And then variable check hit chance more than 4. This is the value that you want to have, the very small value, because the value of hit check will be from 0 to 100. So check this value to be a little small. So here, after that, we will run a checklist. We will run an action list, and this will be our skill check in asset file, skill check. And straight after that, we will do our crit check. And straight after that, we will do our add random damage. And then we can do variable set player damage. So the player's damage is here. This will be a formula, and it will need to increase so it will be select your player damage from the variable, copy the token text, and we will plus it with the increase random damage here. So the first skill check sets the damage based on your skill level. The crit check checks if this skill level damage will be multiplied. Then we will calculate the adding the random damage, and then we will increase it by that value. If you want to have some sort of sound effect that plays only when the player does a critical hit, then you could add it here. You could check for the same if it's more than 95 as we checked here. In our calculate damage we can check if the value is the same or more than 95, then play this sound effect. Okay, those are our damage calculations. Then we also want to allow the player to swing their blade while they're technically not in combat. So let's open up our Adventure Creator editor's active inputs editor. We actually have the action attack here, but it is missing an action list. Probably because we deleted that. So let's create a new one. Just click the plus here and it will be added. And it will be automatically be in some assets folder or wherever. So just drag it in your battle system folder. This is our active input attack. What I have done is make a first physics raycast. So let's find our player in the downloads folder. We will need to add, let's go under camera and create a new child object for this. This will be the name target. This is just here. It will need to have a constant ID script and retain in prefab. So this raycast we will need to shoot it from our camera to our target. this is just to allow the player to swing their blade for fun. And when we are actually near the player and attacking, it will do that from that action list instead. If no object is detected, we will run an animation with our character. This is actually object animate, not character animate. And this will be mechanism. Then we will need to select our sword here, which has the animations. And it will be, don't change parameter, play custom. And then the clip name will be our sword attack. Yeah, actually before, yeah, let's just copy that quickly here. And sword attack 2. So before those we will need to run a variable check random number with 2 possible values. We will prevent the same value twice. We don't need to save the last value and just go option 0 and option 1 to these. I may have forgotten a few things. Yeah, we need to run in background all of the different action lists that we made. We want to run them in background. Make sure you have those set. Because we don't want to pause the game every time we are running something like a damage calculation. So the player cannot run this animation, like they shouldn't be able to spam this attack, so let's wait for 0.2 seconds. We probably don't have an input named attack in our settings. Let's see. Yeah, we do not see anything like that, so let's create a new input here. Name it attack, and it would be mouse button 0. Is it that how it goes? No? Hold on, it is here. Mouse 0, not mouse button, just mouse 0. Just make it there. Yes, that should work, I think. Yeah. It's looping the animation because for the other one we haven't actually set it correctly in our animator itself. So in our MS sword animation, we also want to make a transition back to the sword idle. And in the settings it should have 0 on the transition duration. Yeah. It looked like the sword swinging was very low. So I might want to change that a little bit so we can actually see our blade better when we are swinging it. And same for you. Higher, farther, better, faster. Yes, that's probably fine. So now we don't have any, like, it's still not the greatest animation, but it's better than what we had, right? And we don't have any kind of audio for it, and it just snaps back to its original position. But that's something we are not going to be worrying about today. We can swing pretty fast. I wonder if the raycast is actually working. Oh yeah, now I know. The target, we actually need to put it in front of our player. So set at, is 2 too much? Maybe 1 is enough. I'm not entirely sure. But it should be, I think, at the same distance as our, yeah, now we cannot hit the wall when we are right next to it. I think 2 is good. Because, yeah, let's change it. Because we don't want to, every time we activate an action list, we don't want us to swing the sword. So it is same as here, hotspot ray length is 2. So when we are able to interact with a hotspot, we will not be swinging our weapon also. Now we are going into the interesting areas of this tutorial because we are going to go into parameters. We played around with parameters when we did our little farming system thing, and it taught me how to use these technically, so let's go ahead and create a new action list. And this will be the enemy activator. And because we are going to do parameters, we don't have to have a different action list for each enemy that we have, like we in our previous tutorial system for the battle system. We had it so that we would need to duplicate all of the different hotspots and action lists for each enemy. So now we only need to do one, because we are going to set parameters based on which of the enemies hotspots we are clicking in. So, enemy activator. This will be quite complicated, so try to stay with me. But I think we are going to create all of the different hotspots. I don't know if the order is the best, but yeah, I think we should be fine. I mean, the parameter order, it doesn't matter really, but we will also run it in the background. We can run multiple instances probably. So this means we can attack many enemies, like swinging around very fast. I'm not sure how that affects our gameplay. We can try it on or off, how it affects the gameplay. If we don't want to spam attacks on every single enemy at once, maybe we turn that off. See how it works. Okay. This thing alone has 19 different parameters. We don't necessarily need to have that many. It depends on how many different systems our player has or our enemies have. But yeah, I think this is still quite simple for us. So let's go ahead and start. First, we have a parameter with the name hotspot to affect, and this will be of the type game object. We don't need to worry about any of the default values here. We will be setting them via the script. When we activate a hotspot, we will use the script that will assign these values. And then we have parameter with the name object to turn off, and it will also be a game object. I will explain all of these as we go. Then we have a parameter with the name detected, and this will be a component variable. Then we have a couple of different parameters more for the component variable. Yeah, enemy health will be here. Enemy health. This will also be a component variable. Then we will have NPC to affect, and this will also be a game object. Okay, then we have the damage formula. So this will be of the type string. And here we are actually calculating. We are taking the enemy health's replacement token, and we might just paste it here because it will always be the same for everyone, so that's why we can set it to our default value. It just needs to be here for it to work. So here we will go and minus -9, which is our player damage. All of these token values may differ for you depending on value of your, or like the replacement token. It just depends on the number of the global variable that you have. But just copy those based on what you have there. Then we have a couple of game object parameters. These are our integer particle effects. So this is plot 1 and this is a plot 2, just what I'm using. So depending on if the player swings the sword to the right, the plot will also flow to the right and like that. It's that kind of system. Then we have 2 string parameters, which will be our attack 1 and attack 2. This is depending on how many different attack animations your enemy will have, but we will have 2, so that's enough for us. And then the same for string parameters for enemy die. This is we could also name these like anim underscore attack 1, so just to make it a bit clearer. But we will just run with it. So this will be our enemy's death animation. And we will create another. And it will be enemy die 2. Depending on which way they are facing, they will die in that. Like we have a backstab mechanic, so they will run this different death animation if they die from a backstab. Then we have a death check. Component variable. This will check if the enemy is dead, so it cannot follow us or do anything. Then we have 3 different game object parameters, which are all set to be triggers. So the first is attack trigger. Then we have a chase trigger. Then we also have a dodge trigger. So every time the player gets out of range when the enemy is already attacking, we will dodge the attack, so that's kind of important for that. Then we have yet another game object for detector object. And then we will have integer for exp gain, so you can easily change how much experience your player will always get for killing enemies. And lastly, we have a loot object. So it will be a game object. There we go. That's all of the parameters that I have for our enemies. When we are attacking the enemy, these are the parameters we need. Okay, first things first. When we select in our action list with the parameters now, we will see this little P icon here. So for here we are stopping if the player is moving on a path, we will make sure that they are stopping their movement. And this will be set to our NPC to effect and stop instantly. Then we are setting hotspot, enable or disable. Click the icon here and it will be the first hotspot to effect, and we are disabling the hotspot because when we attack for just a few like 0.2 seconds or something, we will disable the hotspot, so again we cannot spam the attack to the player for as fast as we can click. So this will make sure during the animation we cannot attack again. Then we will also go object, send message, turn off, and this will also have the same hotspot effect. Then we check a variable of the type component, click the letter here and select the detected. And if it is true, then we are doing character face object face player and click the override this field with parameter and select the NPC to affect here. And it should be instant because we are currently working with a 2D character which we will place in our scene. We will create it soon, but let's just first do this. Then here we are running our amazing damage calculation that we created. Then we are variable set component. Click the icon, select enemy health, go integer and set it as formula, and then again override with the damage formula. Then here we are checking another random number, prevent the same value twice, don't save it, and we are running our player's attack animation. So we go object, animate, mechanism, play custom. And for this we need to go ahead in our player and drag the sword icon here. And for the clip name, whatever it was, attack. No, sword attack. Copy that, paste, and sword attack 2 was our another attack. So just check between those randomly. Then here we would send turn on message to our blood, which would activate our particle system. Then after that we will go and check component variable for the enemy health, and if it is integer less than 1, then we here would start doing the enemy's death actions. So from here on I would change the colors to something like you should, to make things clearer, you should use these color things here so you can better see and find where these different systems go. Like this, all of these blue ones are related to the enemy dying. And here if it's not less, then we just wait for 0.2 and then we go back and activate our hotspot, enable, and hotspot to effect, enable. Okay, so we will now do variable check component. We go to the death check here, boolean if it is false, then we will do our death stuff. So hotspot disable our hotspot effect, then variable set component enemy health, set it to integer to 0 just to make sure that their health goes to 0 when they die. Then character NPC follow, here, NPC to effect, and stop following. Then we are object send message. We will be sending turn off messages to all of our triggers. So that will be attack trigger. You can copy this and just change it to chase trigger and the dodge trigger. And to make sure that these different action lists aren't running anymore, we will kill these triggers too. So if they happen to be running when the enemy is dying, we will instantly get rid of them. Instantly turn them off from and stop them from running. And then we would go character, animate, and select the NPC to effect. But this action actually requires a character before more options will show. So that's why we should make our characters. Okay, that's fine. Here we could, when the enemy dies, we could play a death sound. We don't have one at the moment, but that's fine. It can be there. Let's set our variable component death check boolean to true, so the player is now dead. Then we are also, this will be a custom script and it could probably be done better, but this is just the way I do it. Object send message. We will send a custom message with the name reset for our hotspot to effect. So this will basically reset the collider to set it to be a trigger so we can walk through the enemy when they are not standing. So we will then also object transform we will move our loot object to 0 values. So we are technically removing the collider from the enemy when they die, and we are moving another collider to reflect the enemy that is lying on the ground, and we can also loot them with this thing. Then we also object add or remove. We will remove completely our detector object. So when they are dead, we don't need that anymore. So just get rid of that. Then we would run set. We haven't created an XP variable, but player XP should be a thing that we have, and we would just increase its value by the XP gain that we have set here. And then we also would run an asset file which will check the player's XP values and level up if needed. But we don't currently have that system in our game. But yeah, some of these things, if you don't need them, if you don't want to make a RPG kind of systems, you can just get rid of the XP values and maybe the skill things too. If you want to do always a set random value, just modify those systems as they are, whatever works for you. But yeah, to be able to set our animation here, we need to have our enemy object in the scene. So let's create that next. At this point we are bringing some sprites for us to use for our enemy character. They will be 2D sprites. So at the same time I can show you how to do 2D sprites for a 3D game. It's definitely a style choice that not many people may not like, but that's what I do with my own game, so that's what we will do here. So these specific sprites are 72 by 72 pixels. And then let's do the pivot point at the bottom, right about there. And then just do the custom pivot for each frame to be at the same point. I think all of these are the same size, so I can just do the same for each. Okay, select the main like idle facing like this. Just place it in your scene. This will be the sprite of this character. Go to character wizard, create a new NPC, drag the sprite here, and this enemy's name will be just empty, so do a space, so when we look at the enemy their name won't show above their heads, and it will want us to confirm that we are creating a 2D character in a 3D game. But that is fine. I think the name should be empty here for the hotspot too. Okay, so just give this game object here the name and its hotspot and name can be empty. Okay, so for 2D character in a 3D world, we want to turn the root object in 3D, retro style movement, and then we just want to remove the rigid body altogether. We don't need that. The speed can be like maybe 4 and 6 is good. Minimum run distance we want it to be 0, so they can immediately run if they are able. Here we will do our character names. This will be just enemy idle and enemy walk, and copy that same for the run because we don't have different sprites for the run animations. I think everything else checks out. Then in the sprite we want to move the collider to only be on top of the player sprite here, something like that. Then we shall start creating the animations for this one, and since we gave it the name enemy underscore idle, but we have 4 different facings, so underscore D will be the down direction, which is the same as we placed in the beginning. Then create one for left. This will be this. And then create one for right, which will be this. We should be looking at right like from this side, so it's correct. It looks correct, but it will be correct in game, so don't worry about that. And then up, which will be this. And then we do technically the same, but for the walk. And we will choose the first 3 here for the walk down. And then just copy those here, and that should be good. And then left, select those, drag it along a bit, and paste the middle one a couple times at the end there. So it loops around seamlessly. And then the right direction, copy and paste those, and the up. Are these. Copy and paste. Okay, Now since we are here, we should also create the enemy attack 1. And it will be in here. So it also is just 3 frames. We just need to make sure that it looks not like that. Just select the last one. Maybe a little bit faster. And maybe that's good. It's not the perfect animation, but we are working with what we have. Then create attack 2, so it's basically the same but in opposite order. So let's see. Yeah, it's just swinging the blade the other way. Doesn't look as good as this one, but we are working with what we have right now. It's also... hold on. I don't think we need this here in the middle. Then we also need to have the enemy die. Or, yeah, I mean die and death, we need those. So this is the enemy dying animation. So it can be something like that. And then also enemy dead. So it will only be this one. So it stays in the dead animation after they're dead, and they won't just loop this animation. And since we want to have it in the other way too, we have it here. Like so, and then dead 2 and just this, if we manage to kill them from behind. And I think that's everything we need from here, except there were the enemy prepare animation still. So it will basically just be the enemy raising their blade before they strike. So it's something like this. They raise their blade and then they do the attack. And there was 2 of those prepare actions as well. Yeah, that's fine. Probably doesn't need to have the... It's just this. It's fine. It will be there for just a little while. I think that's... Is that everything we need? Maybe. But one thing we have to do is from our enemy attacks, we always want to go back to the enemy idle. And with no exit time and no transition duration, so it snaps to it immediately. And also from the enemy die we want to make a transition to enemy dead. So same thing here, no exit times, no transition durations. And enemy prepares are just their own thing. We will be doing that from the code. And this enemy will also need to have its variables. So we can create those here in a moment. but first let's see if we can actually let's create a new folder for the enemy here, because we created all of these animations and they are flooding our folder here, so hide those. And was it in the enemy activator here? So to get the enemy animate to show, we want to assign this character here and then press the override so we can see this, where we can place the clip here and then place the enemy die here. The first die is here because we will still create different kind of thing for the enemy. Wait, no, this is the enemy death. Straight up dying. And there was another for when we are backstabbing them. Let's see how this goes. So there was just the wait and activate the object. And then this whole thing is for player backstabbing. So we go back up. And we can see when the enemy has not actually detected us, we start a new chain of things here, and this would maybe be different color too. So we can detect these easily. Like if we go here and see all of this would be color red or blue. I guess I pressed blue accidentally. So this is the basic enemy dying from fighting them, and this would be when we backstab them, so they die immediately. So we don't actually have our own backstab animation, so we will just use one of the attacks the player has. So it's the sword attack. That's fine. Here we would also play player sounds. So if the player has attacking like grunts, which we actually, I don't remember if we did, yeah, we didn't set one in here. So I think we will be doing the sounds later when we actually have them, because we don't have them right now. But around this point would be when our player does the backstab, they have a sound to play. So here we want to do when we are actually killing the enemy from a backstab, we will set the component variable enemy health integer. We will just set it to 0. Then we will wait a little bit, just to wait that the animation finishes. Then we will play another sound. That will be the enemy's death sound. And then after that we will set again component variable for death check to be true. So now they are dead. We are basically doing the same things here. When we die, or when the enemy dies, we are removing, not replace, we are removing the detector object. And we are sending a message of the type custom for the hotspot to affect. And it will be the reset, same as earlier, and also object transform for the loot object to set it to 0. And then just we had a weight here, a little bit of a weight. So now, where is the animation? Character animate. It was after the death sound. Yeah, I skipped that. We need to do that too. So character animate, we will select our enemy here and then press the button to override and then go NPC to effect and then do the enemy death. Enemy death 2. Actually, no, don't write it here. We do the override for this too. That's what we needed to do. Enemy died 2, and this was, what was this one? Enemy die, yeah. So yeah, this should all be red. It doesn't matter if you do these colors, but it just makes it easier to read when you look at like this. The reds are when we backstab the enemy. I don't know why this goes here. Oh yeah, this needs to attach to that. There we go, that should be right. Yeah, I don't know why the weight is there. Doesn't necessarily need to be there. I guess it's just so we can't actually accidentally interact with this character again after when they're dying or something like that. That should be it for the enemy activator now. And it should be in our enemies under the sprite. We have the hotspot for this enemy and it will be interaction source of asset file. And we will create use interaction and the enemy activator will go here. This looks at some of the hotspot parameter here. It wants to set it something automatically assigned here, but we don't do this. Instead of that, we need to add a few things here. For example, we should add an remember animator. So this character will remember the changes that happened to it. For example, when they're dead and we come back to this scene, they still should be dead. And then this is the main thing with the parameters interaction, set interaction parameters script. This looks at all the interaction parameters that this hotspot have. It looks it from the action list asset that we created. So here we will have to assign all of these. So the sprite, they still don't actually have all of the things here that we need. So we could create those. So we would have a new particle effect. It's just empty for us right now, but this would be the blood one. I might create those. Let's do underscore because it just keeps it nice and tidy to have the same thing. Underscore for everything, because when you duplicate this enemy you want to change all of these. Blood A and B and then add the number. This would be the blood particle effects I might create some simple pixel kind of thing. Then there would be the enemy detector. This is actually something that only applies for me because I have a crossbow for the enemy, which will check the player's layer, and based on that it will deal damage to that specific enemy. So at this instance we don't actually need to have that in our action list, but let's just create it anyway, just as a reference. So this would need to have, if I do some sort of maybe tutorial for the crossbow at some point for you guys, or any kind of ranged weapon, it would have this kind of same kind of box collider. Maybe a little bit smaller than what its own. It would be its trigger around that size. It would also have the constant ID. And the layer would be the enemy. We don't have an enemy layer here, so let's create one. So that's the enemy layer. Then we have 3 different triggers. So let's just go ahead in our scene and create a new trigger, and then assign it as a child of our enemy. This will be the attacking trigger. Let's remove the box collider, and instead of that we will be using a sphere collider with the radius of 2. This is the range which the enemy will be able to attack you. And it will be asset file running in background, and its trigger type is continuous. It cannot interrupt itself, this is important, so it doesn't do things that we don't want it to do. We haven't yet created the attacking trigger action list. We will create it soon. But this also, the sphere collider needs to be trigger, and it needs to have the remember trigger and set trigger parameters. We will need to set these later because they don't have any at the moment. Then we can just duplicate this a couple of times. We will have a chase trigger. Let's put the underscore one here too. And a dodge trigger. Chase trigger also has to remember and set trigger parameters, yeah. And dodge trigger. Dodge trigger doesn't need to have the set trigger parameters because it's just a really simple thing that it does. But the dodge trigger will be of trigger type on exit, and chase will also be on exit. So when we exit the player's range, we are both dodging enemy's possible attack, and we are setting the enemy to follow us again. Then this is a weird one, but the player will also have an empty game object. This will be the enemy detect area, but since we are using, let's recreate actually the face for the player and put the underscore ones here too, just to make things easier later on. let's put the face. I'm just reordering these the same that my game has them, and let's create one more, and this will be the death object, so the loot when it dies. By default, the death object would be somewhere where the player can't interact with it. So for example, I have it at -5, so under the ground. It's just there, existing at this moment. Enemy detect area is weird because it will have an hotspot asset file, and it will also have an interaction, which we will have to create. Set interaction parameters will also be here, and a constant ID. We are just setting the player ready to have all of these different action lists, which we haven't all created yet. And the death object would be pretty basic hotspot. Let's worry about that later. But yeah, this is weird hotspot because it doesn't actually have any collider to it. So we cannot actually like manually activate this. This will be activated through a different action list because we have this face object, and we will need to create a custom script for the player's field of view. So they wouldn't be, with this they won't be able to see the player through walls and stuff like that. And I watched a tutorial about this. I can't for the life of me right now remember whose tutorial it was, but I'm trying to find it and put it as a link to the description. So all glory to them from about this script. But yeah, this script is then what will activate this enemy detect area hotspot when we have it done. So now we can actually put these different game objects into the set interaction parameters in our sprite. So the first one is the sprite, then we have the enemy detect area as the object to turn off. Then in the detected all of the component variables will be the NPC itself. Then we just have to choose for the detected, it will have to be, we don't have those yet set, but we will just place the player here. Damage formula should be just that. Then we have our particle effects. Then we will need to write our player's attack, enemy attack. This will get laggy, at least it does for me when we have so much to do here with the parameter values, but just try to work with it. I'm not sure how to make it any better, but it is very laggy when you have so much here, at least for me. See, what was the enemy underscore attack 1 and 2. So enemy underscore attack 1, and then just copy that, place it here and change it to 2. And the enemy die, something like that. Enemy die, enemy underscore die 1 and 2. Yeah, easy enough. Death check will also be, no, don't do that. Then all our triggers, attack trigger, chase trigger, dodge trigger, our detector object. Exp gain, let's say 50 for this guy. And then our loot object here. Okay, let's create the different variables that our enemy needs to have. So there's 4. First one is for enemy health. It is the type of integer and place some initial value here, for example 100 or maybe 50. Let's not make them too much for the player as their first enemy. Second one will be of the type integer also. This is for the enemy damage. Then we will have a type of boolean. It will be detected. And the last one is just dead for the death check. Then in the sprite we now can set these different variables. Detected, just put it what it says here, detected. Enemy health, enemy health. Then we had death check to dead. Was there anything else? Detected, enemy health and dead. And then the enemy damage we will set from the attacking trigger. Okay, that should be that done for the enemy activator. Then we will go, we have our face here for the script, but I think I will do the custom scripts last, so we can get this otherwise ready. So let's create a new action list for the attack trigger. So let's just duplicate one of these asset lists and name this attack trigger. Let's name it attack trigger 1 because if you have multiple enemies attacking the enemy at the same time, this is like the only action list that you have to duplicate many times. All of the others are fine just being the one, because if you have the same action list for all of your enemies, only one of them will be able to attack at the same time. There should be a way to like run multiple instances of it, but as of now I haven't figured out how I would do that, so it would create its own instance of the same asset list. So action list, I mean, yeah, whatever. Okay, so the attack trigger, it will be running in the background. We can set the can run multiple instances just so it should so that it should be able to do something. Delete everything if you duplicated. You don't want anything in there. And we will be using parameters here also. We will have, I think, 11 different parameters here. This is for the enemy's attack. So, first parameter, NPC to effect. Game object. And next will be NPC health, which is a component variable. And next we have 2 prepare clips, so these will be strings. And 2 attack clips, which are also strings. So all of these would be the type of string. And this will be prepare 1 clip for animations. Prepare 2 clip. Then we have attack 1 clip and attack 2 clip. So we can easily make different animations for our players and just put their name into the parameter values. Okay. Those are those. Then we will have our own attack sound effect here. Which will be of the type game object. This is something that we would need to have in the same scene, or we could attach it to our enemy also. Then we will have an integer type attack random damage max. Very long word. Then we will have, I think this had a default value. Doesn't really matter if you place this, but if you want to make sure that it's like never like -1 as it sets as the default value, so it wouldn't be able to like heal an enemy if it's for some reason rolls back to the default value. Then again integer type parameter attack increase damage. Also placed 5 there. And then last NPC damage, which is the type of component variable. This had some stuff that I had to like do a bit weirdly to make sure that it worked, but it works, so it's fine. Okay, first character NPC follow, NPC to affect, override, and stop following. So we don't want the player to follow when they are attacking. I mean, we don't want the enemy to follow when they are attacking. We will set, this will have to be a new variable, because I don't think we have one, which will be a global variable if for the player is dodging. So we will set that to false when the enemy is able to attack. So that means the enemy is in range, so the player won't be able to dodge, and they would have to move away from the enemy's field of the area of effect. And then variable check component override NPC health integer is more than 0, so that means they're not dead. You could also check for the player is dead, but we are just doing this because we don't actually have it here. We don't need that. Okay, if it's more than 0, then we will make sure the character face object override NPC to affect faces the player and is instant. For 2D characters you should also always use is instant, because at least for me at some point if this wasn't checked on, the game would just freeze there and forever try to face them towards something, but they couldn't. It's something to do with how the 2D characters work in 3D environments. It's probably, I don't know if it's fixed, and I don't know if it was only a problem when the player had the if the player had the rigid body, or if the enemy had the rigid body. But just do this if you have a 2D character. You wouldn't want to do this for a 3D character probably. Then variable check random number 2 prevent same value twice. Then we will go our 2 different options for animations. So character animate, and it will be the NPC to affect, but before we can apply any of these things, we want to first add the player into this field and then override. So this will show the method here. So we are playing custom, and the clip will be the prepare clip 1 and 2. Then we will wait for 0.3 seconds, so that way the player will have some time to dodge the attack and they won't immediately do damage to the player. Then we would play the enemy's attack sound, so we can add sound here and override this field. This would be the attack sound effect. Copy this here, it's the same, and then character animate, drag the enemy here, override, and this would be the attack clip. Copy and paste and change the attack clip to the 2 for the other one. Then again we are going back to 1 and then 0.3 seconds. You can change the timings if you want the battles to be faster or slower, but this is what I have currently and it seems to be fine. We have here variable check. If the player is dodging, we will wait a little bit here, and then if the player is not dodging, we will set the variable set component override value integer for the NPC damage, and we will set it as attack random damage max. And then we will copy paste this and we will change the method to increase by value and then attack increase damage here. Then this is, I think, the weird thing. We have to do this so the number that we are calculating here goes back to the player's component. So we want to do variable copy component override NPC damage to a global source of enemy damage. We don't have a global variable of the type enemy damage, but this is just, this always change, this should just be, so like we are throwing the damage value from the enemy's component to a global variable and then taking that back to the enemy's damage value, because it's just weird, but I had to do this so it works. So let's just do the enemy damage here. It's very difficult to explain because I don't understand it completely myself, but to try to put it simply, we are taking the damage value from the component variable of the enemy and copying it to the enemy damage global variable. So this is then how we can calculate the enemy damage formula. So we can here then go and calculate, I think it's this enemy damage minus the player's armor value, if we have armors. Because the component variables through parameters, I think they had problems calculating things through these formulas. So that's why we have to do this kind of override. I hope I was able to explain that in a way that makes sense, but it's kind of a workaround, but it works. Okay, after that's done, we will check a variable global enemy damage. If it's less than 1, we will set it to 1 because we don't want to, again, we don't want to heal the player through enemies attacks. So every time if we go too much to minus values, because the player could have more armor than what the enemy does damage, it would go to heal the player. So this way we are always making sure that the enemy deals at least 1 point of damage, even if the player has unlimited armor, basically. You could also set this to 0, I think, if you want it that way, but I like it that the enemy is always able to do some damage at least. Then we set the global value for the player HP with the formula of we will remove this enemy damage from our player health. So it will be this minus copy the player HP global variable token and minus it with the enemy damage token. And that way we will do damage to our player. Then we have this taking damage action list, which I think, how did we do with the triggers, the damage triggers? Because we did create this menu, so we could add a little bit of shake to the player too. What's this sound? Oh, this is just the fire. Okay. So turn on the damage screen and shake the camera a little bit. I think that's good. So every time we take some damage, we can turn on the damage screen just a bit and shake the camera. And then lastly, wait a half a second so the enemy won't be able to also spam those attacks. So now what we can see in the set trigger parameters, when we add our attack trigger to the action list, it will have all of these different fields here too, same as with the sprite. So again, we will need to add the correct values here. So it will be the enemy, and then we have to go and check the enemy's health. Then we have the prepare and attack clips here. So their name were enemy underscore attack and enemy underscore prepare. So enemy underscore prepare 1 copy. Did not want to do that. And prepare 2 and enemy underscore attack 1 and copy paste attack 2. Then we would have the attack sound effect here. Do we have any player? Let's make this the attack sound. Just remove the fire for now. We will look for those sounds and in a bit maybe. So just assign this to the attack sound here. Here are our attack random damages and then the enemy variable here, and this will be the enemy damage. That's that. Then I think chase trigger will be a bit simpler. Yeah, let's create a new action list. And this will be our chase trigger, and it will also be run in background, can run multiple instances and use parameters. This will only have 2 parameters. So we have the component variable to affect. You could give these simpler names, I guess, but this is the component variable, and then the another one is npc to affect, and this will be of the type GameObject. So what's in here, chase trigger? It will simply be variable check, the component, overridden component variable to affect, integer is more than 0. So this will be checking the enemy's health. So I guess we could just name this component variable to affect instead be enemy health. So if enemy's health is more than 0, we will then go character npc follow, override for npc to affect, follow player, and update frequency, minimum distance, maximum distance out 1, and face when idle. This will be different based on the sizes of your different NPCs and characters, but see what works for you. It will come close and then it will start attacking. So that's that. That's so simple. Then we just go to the chase trigger, throw the chase trigger as the action list asset, and then just go drag the enemy to both of these, and then just enemy health is the enemy health, and that's correct. Then we had the dodge trigger, so duplicate chase trigger maybe, rename it to dodge trigger, then the only thing that we have in the dodge trigger is delete that, change the variable to set global to player is dodging is true. So every time we do the dodge trigger, we will simply just make sure that the player is dodging the enemy's attack. Then we had the detected trigger, or the hotspot, but it is triggered through the custom script in the field of view that we will have to create. So let's create yet another action list with the name detected. Hold on. Detected. There we go. And it will, surprise, surprise, be a running background. We can run multiple instances that will be using parameters. We will have 7 different parameters. The first one will be object to disable of the type GameObject. The second one will be npc to affect, which will be also GameObject. Then we have a trigger detected. We will be using component variable here. Trigger detected. Then we have attack trigger. It is the type GameObject. Then we have a chase trigger. It is also the type GameObject. And then we have dodge, no, chase and dodge, yeah. Dodge trigger of the type GameObject. And the last one will be component variable for checking if the enemy is dead. Okay, now we will first go ahead and create a variable check component override trigger detected boolean equal to false. Then we will check another variable if our enemy is dead equal to false. So we will check if they have not detected and they are not dead. Then we will start following character npc follow override select npc to affect. No, we are actually, yeah, this is different. Select character move along path. If it so happens that the enemy has a path it walks along, so we need to make sure that they stop moving on their path, stop instantly. And it will be the NPC to affect here. Then we will send a message to an object to turn off, object to disable. And then we will also send messages, but these are turned on for all of our triggers. So attack trigger, copy, paste, link that, chase trigger, and dodge trigger. All of them should be turned on. And then also variable set component override trigger detected boolean to true. And lastly, character npc follow, npc to affect, start following the player with update frequency, minimum distance and maximum distance of 1 and facing when idle. And then just throw that detected interaction to our hotspot that is in the enemy detect area. So now we can also set up our different interaction parameters here. So when we are detected, we should disable the enemy detect area. And then npc to affect is itself. Then we go and check the variables, make sure it is to the detected, and then attach the different triggers, attack trigger, chase trigger, and dodge trigger. Then also set its own variable check to the dead. Is dead. Check the is dead. Yes, that makes sense, right? Then we have the death object. We could just create that quickly here. So it would need to have a capsule collider, and since the player will be laying down, so we will make it on x-axis of height 1.4 maybe, and radius of 0.3 and 0.1, so it's a bit above the pivot point. Then it would need to have an hotspot, and this, name it whatever you want here, it will be our enemy. And here if we do the use, it would need to have its own, again, a new action list. So this would be the enemy loot death object. Throw that enemy loot here. It is actually, we need to make sure that it is interaction sources asset file, then throw the enemy loot here. Then we should have remember hotspot and remember transform. I'm not entirely sure if you need both of these, but just to make sure that it works, because it is changing it transform and hotspot at some point. It will also need to have the movable script, so it can be moved through the script or through the action list we had there. And then this will also have set interaction parameters, but we need to create those for the enemy first. So enemy loot. Here we would play some sort of pickup sound. Then we will object send message. We need to create the parameters. So again, this enemy loot is run in background. Can survive scene changes, I suppose. Not sure. Yeah, it's fine. Revert to default values. It doesn't really matter because we are always setting these when we collect new stuff. But here we have only 3. So the first one will be inventory item. So we can check which kind of inventory item we will add. This second one will be the type integer for in item count. And the last one will just be the hotspot itself. So it is type of game object and hotspot. Those are the parameters. And here we had to override for the hotspot turn off when we interact with this. And then what you want to do is variable check random number, and however many different items you may want to get from this enemy here. Like we only have bottle of wine, sword and shield and coins, and also these armors. But yeah, let's say we have 4 changes, 4 different items. So prevent the same value twice, we don't need to save it. And here we will just add inventory, add, item to add, override, set amount, override. Actually, yeah. So what we are doing here, we are actually not setting the death object's interaction parameters for itself. So I don't think it actually needs this. But it needs to have some sort of default value. So I suppose it's fine. But yeah, before we add the inventory items, we can just set action list set parameter to change its own parameters to be whatever the item you want it to be. And also for the item count. We can enter it here. We can add, for example, this random value here. So let's say we can add 1 to 2 or maybe just 1 bottles of wine. Copy, paste. And here we can change this to be coins. Coins we could have 1 to 15 maybe. And then just do this from the random check. Copy that couple more times. Whatever items you may want to give the player. Doesn't really make sense to have the random value if you're adding just a sword, so you could just enter here. And if you want to have a random value of coins, for example, have it be this random. So here we are just setting giving the sword or the shield or the bottle of wine. And that should be it for this. So it will randomly give one of these items, one of these choices for items when we are interacting with this hotspot here. So the death object, let's give it the value of coins and assign its hotspot to itself and just value of 1. So this will set its like value to something, but when the action list runs it changes here again, so it should be this value instead of this value. But yeah, this is just to set the, well, we probably don't need this set interaction parameters here, because if we want to have default values, we can just set it here in the parameter values. Yeah, it probably works either way. If you only want to have one specific item, you don't need to do this big of an action list. And probably you need to have these enemy loot action lists, many different types for different enemies, to give you a different like loot table for random items. Okay, so now we are missing a couple different things still, and these would be a reset trigger script for our sprite here. So let's create that. It's a C# script, and just reset trigger is the name. So here we want to, in the beginning, have a serialized field, private collider. You can just have a public collider. You don't need to use the serialized field, but I guess this is like the safe and like professional way to do it. I'm not sure. And then in the if start, if collider is like null, it's nothing, then we will set the collider to find itself. Then we have this our custom thing, which is the reset. So we check if the collider is not nothing, then we will set the collider's trigger value to either true or false. So this same, we just run the reset, and depending on if the trigger is, if the collider is set to trigger, then it will be set to false, and if it's false, then it's set to true. It's very simple. And this is the script that we want to have on our sprite here. So it just stays there at the bottom, and it will now see we can add the collider here as its own itself. It will make sure that the enemy collider will not be a solid collider technically when it dies. It finds the reset command from the action list. And then the phase. This is a bit more complicated thing. So let's create a new script. Yeah, make the script name field of view. Copy the name because I accidentally named it just A. So do that. I changed this a little bit from what the tutorial taught, but it needs to have using AC here because we are going to be activating the hotspot through this script. We wanted to have these different things: public float for radius and public float angle. We want to be able to reference the player. We want to have a couple different public layer masks, and then we are just setting here a public pool if they can see the player, and this is the AC hotspot for the interaction. In the start we just set the start coroutine, and then there will be this coroutine of FOV routine, and we will just do all of this shit. So we don't need the update function, and it is just this kind of thing. So from the start we run this FOV routine, and in this it will just wait a 0.2 seconds, I suppose, and then it will run the field of view check. It will check the colliders if it overlaps with the transform position, radius, target mask, all of this. If it sees the specific collider of the target mask in a range, then it will see the player. This is really not my strong point, this coding and math stuff, but all of this was from the tutorial. So if you want to properly do this kind of script, you might want to follow that tutorial. And what I changed here was just that when the enemy can see the player, we will be running our action list through the hotspot. So we are running the use interaction of the hotspot, so they will start following the player. You can pause to copy all of this and then continue when you are ready. Then we will just give this field of view object to our face here. We want to give it some radius like 10 and angle like 100. And the player ref, because of how the Adventure creator spawns the player, we want to just drag the prefab of the player. It won't actually look at or like point at the player when they are detected. If we were to create this different target mask is player, yeah, the player should have the, do we even have actually the mask for the obstruction mask? Can just be default. I don't think we have a player. Okay, let's create player. Target mask is player, and make sure your player has that somewhere in it. It's just the first, okay. Ignore raycast. Do the player here. Just this object. First person player, change the player to layer. Change the layer to player, yes, makes sense. Okay, so now they should be able to detect, and then the interaction would be the enemy detect area, which has the hotspot, which will be then run based on these interaction parameters. But currently we don't actually see any kind of clues where the player is actually looking. So we need to create, this is also from the tutorial, but inside editor folder, inside assets and editor. It needs to be here because we don't want it to be there on build. We don't need it there. So another C# script with the name field of view editor. So I'm just going to open this and copy paste everything. It looks like this. A lot of different math things that I have no idea how I would ever explain to you how it works, but it works. Copy all of this and return to the tutorial when you are ready. I also link the tutorial, if I can find it, to the description so you can follow the tutorial properly and you can then see how it works and the guy can explain it a lot better. Save that. And now that that is there, when we click on our face for the enemy, we should actually raise up the face object to actually be on the same level as the enemy's eyes, so it will properly show like where the enemy is looking. Now we can see if we change the radius, it will show how far the enemy can see. 10 is probably good for our purposes here, and then the range 360 if they can see all around them, 100 to let them have a pretty poor peripheral vision, but hey, they are wearing a hood here, so it's fine. Just remove this because it will throw in the enemy activator the last action list to run. If it's empty, it will throw some errors, so just delete that. It would be just to check our players XP. If we are running animation, we will need to send it to the NPC to effect and not the hotspot to effect. We had this parameter value in the damage formula, but for this we actually want to copy the component variables token here from the component variable and then place that here, because that was just the problem, that the damage formulas are, they can't like calculate from the parameter tokens directly. And the beauty that comes with using parameters, we can just duplicate the enemy and just, we don't have to do this, but we can just quickly change the names to reflect their parent object. So say change all the 1s to 2s. The beauty with the parameters comes with the fact that it automatically updates all of your child objects to be its own children and not be of the another object. So only thing here that we have to do is go and copy this new object health replacement token from the variables and paste it on top of this one to the damage formula. And the only thing we should do is duplicate the enemy new attack trigger. Where's the enemy's attack trigger? There it is. Duplicate that for our new enemy. So depending on how many enemies you can have in your scene at the same time is also the number of different attack triggers, because each enemy should have its own attack trigger, but you only have to duplicate it. All the parameters, all the settings are the same, because this will be just the same. You only need to, when you have done all of that once, then this is much easier. I think that's done. Everything's done here. needs a bit of fiddling with the timings for the blades hitting and audios playing to make sure that it like syncs up, everything syncs up perfectly. But at least for now, but seems to me that this is already better than what we had previously, because yes, that is a lot of work to create these systems, but from this point on we can just duplicate these enemies everywhere in any scene and they should work. Just the only thing that we have to modify is copy this component variables replacement token for the health and add it in the sprite for it in the damage formula, so it should work like that. But yeah, that has been quite a large tutorial doing all of this from the ground up, and still it's not perfect, it needs some polish, but I think this is better starting point than what we had before. But yeah, I hope you were able to follow that. I had some issues myself with various things here, but I managed to set them correctly. Everything should be fine at this point. So if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you for watching.